Dr. Anthony Harper, blessed to be with David Horowitz to join me about his book, Final Battle, and what's at stake about this next election and how it could be our last. So thank you, David, for joining me on this crucial topic for America. I want to ask you, first of all, what are your concerns about this next election? What's at risk?
Well, at risk is our whole system, the electorals. The Democrats have been conducting a war against the electoral system for decades. They attacked Trump viciously and without any serious evidence of wanting to overturn the election because he challenged the election result. Mm-hmm. They challenged every single Republican presidential victory, did the formal thing of going into the well of the House and demanding the decertification of electors since 1980. Every single Republican has been challenged as illegitimate. And what they did to Trump by concocting, and we know that it came out of the Hillary campaign and the DNC, the Russia collusion hoax, they and forming what they called a resistance at a big meeting in Washington to his presidency. I mean, you want to talk about insurrection, there it is. But we have a completely corrupted media because of the state of our academic world. Most of our problems, I think, certainly the all-out attack on our system originates in the universities, which were taken over by the Marxist left starting 50 years ago. I've written 5 books on that subject.
Along with that subject, David, I was just thinking about Lincoln's proclamation. He said, America is a nation that has forgotten God. A lot of our audience sees that the universities have left God.
They hate God. They hate religion. They hate religion and the family because these are independent of the state. And they're communists, basically, or fascists. There's really no difference. And you can see this just in the way they tolerate these Jew-hating Nazis in the Congress, like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib.
Yes.
Pathological liars. And they identify with, and Biden has sent hundreds of millions of dollars to a Nazi organization, Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority, who openly say that their goal is to liberate Palestine and make it Judenrein, Jew-free. These are just Nazis. And Pelosi put Ilhan Omar, who comes, her father was a communist who served the worst dictator in Africa, Simon Bar, who killed 50,000 of his citizens in a year and was called by the UN, no less, the worst human rights abuser in Africa, which is saying something.
It's very troubling what I see.
Caucus. It's not just the 2 I named at AOC, that whole racist caucus, which is referred to as the Squad, is the Nazi caucus in the Democrat Party in the House and on no longer on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but Pelosi put her on, before she even started. It was in her first, when she was first elected, she was given access to our top military secrets, even though she's an enemy of the United States. As anybody who's spent 10 minutes looking up what she says and who she raises money for, it's a very sad state of affairs.
It is very, very, very sad state. I was just going to comment about. I know you're really concerned about our university system, the training of students here, and we're leaving God out of the equation. So basically, in your book, you're addressing about what's at risk.
Well, it's not leaving God out. God is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these bigots on the left, like the LGBTQ official community, is an incredibly aggressive persecutor, mainly of Christians. The Black Caucus is a persecutor of Jews. I mean, you know, it couldn't be more obvious what's going on, but people won't believe anything.
There's a lot of issues that you deal with in your book. I know January 6th is part of this. It's a really big issue. I was there January 6th to witness. You may have noticed as well, but the Capitol Police wasn't. Maybe they just didn't want to be prepared for this, because I saw the Capitol Police.
It was a trap. There's no question that Nancy Pelosi, look, Trump, whom they're accusing of organizing an insurrection, which is idiotic, offered 10,000 National Guards. I mean, this is, the government auditor has the record of this request, and it was turned down by Pelosi and the Democrats. Because
I remember.
Yeah, and how many provocateurs, there were all these provocateurs who were named and who have not been arrested, summoning people to rush the Capitol. And then you have videos, which Newsmax and Fox have published, showing Capitol Police officers escorting people into the building. And it was a relatively peaceful protest, except for some provocative acts by the police and by infiltrated, shall we say, from the left. But mainly a peaceful crowd, certainly compared to all the insurrections of the summer of 2020.
I know, it's very troubling. I think about, as you just mentioned, the summer of 2020, more of an insurrection happening during those Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes, they burned the Church of the Presidents. They burned the guardhouse, and they were threatening the White House fence. If you want to talk about insurrection. And the same people like General Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he refused to invoke the Insurrection Act. He opposed it when Trump proposed it for what was an insurrection. And then, because he said, it's only an insurrection if they fire on Fort Sumter, if there's an army out there. These people were all unarmed, and yet Milley was one of their chief persecutors. Just terrible.
The big question for our audience also is about why did the Democrat Party intervene during the Black Lives protest, that insurrection,
because
and condemn that and
they're
stop it?
communists and fascists. They hate America. That should be obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Open a whole border. Every country has borders. We're as Republican isolationists are fond of pointing out, we're spending a fortune in Ukraine defending their border. We have border security that we paid for in the Middle East, but not our borders. So you let 5 million unvetted people into the country, which include terrorists, gangsters, rapists, and so on and so forth. Not to mention, China's at war with us. They've said they're poisoning our population, and it's larger numbers of fentanyl deaths than casualty deaths in the Second World War per year. Mm-hmm. And the Biden administration is doing nothing because Biden is bought and paid for.
I'm really concerned.
Transparent once you don't have these internal censors that they like to sanitize the language. If you're talking properly about these classified documents that Biden has sprinkled all over, you would have to start by saying that the Biden family has made itself filthy rich by taking bribes from foreign powers, chief among them Chinese communists, who are our mortal enemy. That's the actual state of affairs in our country.
It is very troubling. Think about all the issues that you're dealing with in your book about how the Democrat Party, and it's sad to say that even some Republicans aren't in support of the Constitution. But what is your major concern about the violation of the Constitution by the Democrat Party?
Well, it's on so many fronts. First of all, our system was created to have people who would normally be at war with each other make compromises and live together. It's an ingenious system. And the Democrats and we call it the system of checks and balances. The Democrats are seeking to destroy the Electoral College, which is part of that system, the independence of the judiciary by packing the Supreme Court, which is an essential part of that system. And so, I could go on, but I'll just say and so forth. They clearly, their goal has been a one-party state now for decades. The rigging elections is not even controversial anymore. Anybody who's looked at the evidence knows the Democrats are stealing elections, and they do it in the name of some higher good. They're basically communists. I say this as somebody who was brought up by communists.
Mm-hmm.
Really no difference between them and the Stalinists.
What is the threat for having mail-in ballots? I know you've addressed this issue several times.
Yeah, people, here's the thing. You can't say whether the 2020 election was fixed or not, because there's never been an audit of the vote. And the evidence, for example, that Trump assembled has never been examined. It's always been thrown out on procedural grounds, not on a review of the actual evidence. But there's a system to what the Democrats have done in the electoral arena. You can say, for example, that the Democrat Party in 2020 mounted a massive campaign to make cheating easier. And they did it by reversing all the recommendations of the Carter-Baker Commission. We had a problematic election in 1960, which was decided by the Supreme Court between Bush and Gore.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy Carter and James Baker, who was Bush's Secretary of State and Chief of Staff, formed the Carter-Baker Commission to try to protect the integrity of the vote. And every recommendation they made has been reversed. That is, where they say this, you should not, well, I do say you should not have ballot harvesting, for example, because it's too easy, it makes it easy to cheat. The Democrats have pushed ballot harvesting and ballot boxes. The number one recommendation was there needed to be more laws requiring voter ID. Well, anyone who's paid the slightest attention to these controversies knows that the Democrats spent the last 2 years denouncing voter ID as voter suppression and racist. Jim Crow 2.0, this nonsense. And I say it's not an opinion that it's nonsense, because the minorities have voted in record numbers in the states where those laws have been put in effect. The second main recommendation was no unsolicited paper ballots. where you send out these, I think they sent out, the Democrats, 90 million ballots, which are, they don't have signatures on them. There's no way to connect them to real people who may or may not be citizens, may or may not be dead, may or may not have moved from the state. So there's been just massive fraud. And of course, the Democrats, when they lie so obviously that you know they're guilty. They say that it was the most perfect and fair election in the history of the country, or maybe the world, whatever they say. It obviously wasn't.
I know there's a lot of lying going on at the White House that I witnessed there. I know you're concerned about hypocrisy on this issue. I hear the Biden administration talk about that they oppose the violation of human rights, but yet they support human rights violations, especially I think about anti-Semitism. The Biden administration said they oppose anti-Semitism when they're funding directly anti-Semitic organizations. And that I know that's
the ones. I mean, Hamas is over in its charter. It doesn't use these. Well, these words have been used by the Palestinians. They're out to finish the job that Hitler started. But it's a movement, the Palestinian so-called national movement began as a supporter of Adolf Hitler. The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem went to Berlin during the Second World War to recruit an Arab legion for Hitler and devised his own Auschwitz for the Middle East, which was thwarted when Montgomery defeated Rommel at Al Alamein. These people are Nazis in the purest sense of the word. I mean, you don't get any more Nazi than it's Abbas, the head of the dictator of the Palestine Authority, who said that a liberated Palestine will be Jew-free. What more evidence do you need? And the Bidens and the Democrats have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into these engines of genocide.
What would you say to the thinking about the Trump, Jared Kushner peace plan, that Palestinian state dividing Israel, and those that might think that there was some political fallout for Trump, former President Trump, after release of this peace plan to divide Israel?
Yeah, I hate to admit it, but I'm not familiar with that plan.
Okay, well, that came out in January 28, 2020. Michelle Bachmann was talking about her really noticing that there was a downfall. There was a real impact on Trump's political campaign after the release of that peace plan. But just overall talking about the concerns of anti-Semitism that seem to be on the rise, really affect.
The Palestinians are an invented nationality. In 1948, when Israel was created, the Palestine Symphony was the Israeli symphony. There was no Palestinian identity. And the land that Israel was created on, as you well know, was a part of the Turkish Empire for 400 years previously. The Turks are not Palestinians, and they're not even Arabs. And they forfeited it. And Lebanon and Jordan and Iraq and Syria were all created in the same way. Jordan is something like 70 or 80% Arab. I don't want to confuse people by saying Palestinian Arabs, because there was no Palestine. They were just lived in the vicinity of the Jordan. Why isn't there a war against the Hashemite minority that runs and oppresses so-called Palestinians in Jordan? because they're not Jews, the Hashemites. This is Nazism pure and simple.
I remember reading an article about the myth of Palestine that appeared in the Jerusalem Post, that it was the Roman Emperor Hadrian that created Palestine issue. But I know this is a serious concern that you have.
For the 400 years that it was part of the Turkish Empire, there was never a Palestinian national movement, let alone a Palestinian entity. It was invented in 1964 by Nasser and the KGB. We know all this. The slogan of the so-called Palestinians until then had been push the Jews into the sea. That's their basic agenda. And the Russians and Nasser pointed out that this was a political non-starter, and that they need to position themselves as an oppressed people seeking self-determination. And that's how the Palestine nationality was created.
I want to bring up the other issue you address in your book is about the new Green Deal. Explain to our listeners what you're concerned about that new Green Deal that the Biden administration.
Well, it's based on a hoax. You may have noticed we've had one of the coldest winters in memory. I didn't see one newscast mention climate change or global warming during this. It's a complete hoax to put money in the pockets of Democrat donors who are all over the green industrial, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, I know it's a very troubling issue for America, being at the White House.
And what it does is it's apocalyptic. Rosa Luxemburg had the slogan, for younger viewers, she was a leader of the left in Germany at the end of the First World War. And she said, the issue is socialism or barbarism. Mm-hmm. And the communist left always makes it extreme, that you're either a Nazi or you're a communist. That's the way they divide the world. And that's what this apocalyptic notion that the future will disappear if we have global warming. Actually, given I'm in the mountains here, and the winter we've had, which is the coldest since I've been here, I've lived here 5 years, we could use a little global warming. I mean, 1 or 2 degrees, whatever.
Well,
what it is it's a pretext for total control of the population.
I've often thought about solar activity.
Book, Tom Steyer, I was a multi-millionaire, probably a billionaire, who changed the politics of Colorado from Republican to Democrat with his money. But he said, if I'm elected, he was one of the Democrat primary contenders. If I'm elected president, I will tell corporations what they can produce. I will tell them how they can produce it. They just want total control. If it's a choice between the end of the world and anything they demand will, of course, seem reasonable.
So the big issue the point you're making in the book is about this next election. Share with our viewers the major concern. What needs to be done regarding this next election that can steer?
Trump has started. Republicans have to start. Since Democrats are basically criminals. Why do I say that? Well, I give you 2 examples. One is the destruction of our border was illegal and unconstitutional. The president is the chief executive. His obligation and authority is to enforce the law, not to make it. But if you don't enforce the law, you've actually changed it, which is why our cities are being ravaged by these street criminals without consequence for them, why our border doesn't exist, and just a gateway for drug dealers and rapists. Trump has said that the Republicans need to support and use ballot harvesting. I think that I'm just giving an example of one candidate is, to not to put your head in the sand when the Democrats are stealing elections, but to go toe to toe and head to head with them in their and expose their tactics and counter them. So I think the Republican Party, look, in the 2020 election, all 6 battleground states, the legislatures were controlled by Republicans. It says in the Constitution that the state legislatures make the voting rules. And the Democrats went in and they changed all the voting rules by shifting, like in Pennsylvania, they shifted the responsibility from the Republican-controlled legislature to the Democrat-controlled Supreme Court. So the whole Pennsylvania vote, which is what put Biden over the top, was illegal and unconstitutional. But Republicans just didn't challenge it. So, I mean, a big problem here is the Republican Party's unwillingness to fight for our country. And the other example I was going to give is the murder of Ashley Babbitt. She's 5 foot tall, 40 years old, a 14-year Air Force veteran, unarmed. It's all on video, menacing no one. And she was shot at point blank range by a Capitol police officer whom Nancy Pelosi protected. She concealed his name and she quashed any investigation. She set him free, and then she gave him a medal for defending the Capitol, which makes her an accomplice to murder, all this cover up, which is true of the whole Democrat leadership. They all know what happened. So if the Democrat Party is willing to murder a 14-year Air Force veteran female who is unarmed, what are they not capable of? This is not something that took place in secret. As I say, it was videotaped. And Republicans, not only do they not make enough noise about this, because it shows the true character of the Democrat Party. But Kevin McCarthy even said that officer his name is Michael Byrd, was doing his job. And he was right to kill her. It leaves one speechless. What do you do with a party like that that's in power? They're so dangerous and they're so unprincipled. And it's not like you have a lot of resignations from Democrats. It's not like you have a lot of pushback from within the left. And you could tell that from the time Trump ran. Here's a guy who everybody in America knew. He was very famous for 30 years before he ran. He was a lifelong liberal, friend of the Clintons, given awards by, I forget the name, but Muhammad Ali got an award when Trump did from the NAACP, and Rosa Parks. So there he is, framed by the left as somebody who deserves to get an award with Rosa Parks and Muhammad Ali. The minute he runs for president, he's a white supremacist and white nationalist. It's idiotic.
It's very troubling.
Pardon?
I know it's very troubling, what was going on. What would you say to the Republican Party that some of the Republican Party that are supporting this Palestinian state idea to divide Israel. How would that impact their campaign?
Jew hatred is the oldest hatred in the world. It's been going on for thousands of years. And there are plenty of anti-Semites, I guess, in the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad because, you know, if you can't defend the only democracy in the Middle East, what can you defend?
I understand. In your book, The Final Battle, the next election could be the last. You make some very good points. And what would your final message to our audience be about the concerns of this next election?
The problem
what is overall at risk for America right now?
Patriots and conservatives have real lives, and they tend to have a live and let live attitude, which is really what the Constitution was aimed at, developing such an attitude that we should all get along and so forth, and come together and have peaceful transitions of power and so forth. But Republicans and conservatives and patriots, I would put it that way, people who believe in America's principal foundations, they tend to, tend to their own gardens and have a live and let live attitude. So they don't. It's almost like they're embarrassed to embarrass their enemies. Why aren't Republicans screaming from the rooftops every time they're interviewed? But, why don't they have a slogan, well, we know who killed Ashley Babbitt. Why isn't Michael Byrd in jail? Why isn't he being prosecuted? Republicans don't like to ruffle the waters. So I would say to people, if you want to save your country, the first thing you have to do is speak out, call things by their right names. Different people will have different degrees of ability and courage to stand up against the racism of the Democrat Party and its criminality. The idea that, what's going on in our cities is unbelievable. It's just a free license for, scum to go around brutalizing people, robbing them and killing them. And then they get released. It's just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say you have to up the language and go on the offensive. And if you don't do it in the next couple of years, you may never have the chance again.
It is a very troubling picture. What is in your book about this final battle? What's at risk? And so a lot of our audience would agree with you that we need to do something more to stand up and not tolerate the abuse, the disrespect for the Constitution. Most importantly, disrespect for God in this matter. But I want people to, learn more about your book, The Final Battle, about what's at risk in this next election. So people can go online and check that out.
The difference between left and right is in their views of human nature. To the left, society is the villain, and people are good at heart, and they would be cooperative and behave if they were released from the oppressions of government.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I shouldn't say that because they love government. But they believe that people are good at heart, so that if you remove all these laws, everything will be peaceful, which is an idiotic point of view, but it's very compelling. You're saving the world. And conservatives are, it's really grounded in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and particularly in the book of Genesis. We are the problem. People are not good at it. People are when they want to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They want to know evil. A big problem that the left doesn't face at all. Criminals are not like law-abiding people, and they should not be treated as though they would be law-abiding in a different society. They'll be criminals wherever they are, wherever they can get away with it.
Thank you for addressing these issues in your book about the final battle, and encourage people to check out your book online, making a big difference. Thanks for all your service and your reporting. And I know you've written a lot of good books. And I thank you for joining me and sharing your concerns about what's at risk in America.
Actually, we have our whole system, constitutional system, was inspired by and shaped by a Christian monk named Martin Luther, 400 or 400 years earlier, something of that order. I've already written a book about that, and it'll, in a couple of years, come out.
Well, I thank you so much for joining me, David. So it's been a blessing to talk with you and to hear these concerns that you address in your book about the final battle. And I look forward to talking with you again on this matter.
People don't have to be as blunt as I am, but I take great courage or confidence from the revolt of the parents in the schools at the atrocious teachings of the racist doctrines called critical race theory. I think the revolt of the parents is just a wonderful sign that our country has a chance to survive.
Well, I sure do hope so. And I hope after all the great sacrifice for America's freedoms, that America will survive as we have known it to be a great nation. But I know that we talked about President Lincoln's knowledge that it won't happen without a respect for God first.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, you shouldn't write off all. I happen to be an agnostic, and you can't write off agnostics and atheists. But I don't know that a society can function without a strong belief in God. I don't know that it's what was part of my conversion from the left, not a belief in God, but an understanding of how important a concept of God is because God is a higher power than the state. And if the state runs things, that's just the worst people can rise to power in the state.
Yeah, I know what you're saying is that the state can become, well, we see this, the expression of communism with China and Russia and many other countries' dictatorship, and the people's rights is ignored. But some great things that you've been bringing up in the book and about our nation needing to have that understanding of a higher power of God, that we are not the one. I know that a Declaration of Independence that says we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. We're not given our rights by the state.
Yeah, those unalienable rights are the key. The state won't take away, although they're trying all the time to take away your rights.
And that's a real attempt to destroy. You're probably familiar with Dinesh D'Souza. He had a book about Death of a Nation, and that's what has really been happening.
Terrific book. I've known Dinesh for 30 years or more. Good man.
You've got a lot of great books. Thank you for joining me, David, on these matters. And I hope that you'll join us again to talk about some more of your concerns.
Just invite me.
Okay. Well, thank you. Stay warm in Colorado. or wherever you're at.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you mentioned that newspaper, Jewish newspaper in Colorado.
Yeah, InterMountain Jewish News.
Yeah, they've never contacted me.
Oh, okay.
It's just interesting. I mean, I'm probably the only site that isn't dedicated to Judaism or Christianity. That's a frontline defender of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been to Israel, actually. But
well, I hope you'll make it very soon. It's a very troubling time for Israel, what they're going through.
Oh, yeah. The Jews are going to take it on the chin again if we don't get the Democrats out of power.
The Biden administration is trying to interfere with the Israeli elections and trying to tell them what to do. And I do know that, as I mentioned before, the hypocrisy about what they're saying. They oppose anti-Semitism, but they're directly funding these anti-Semitic organizations of Palestinian force.
Yes. Anti-Semitism has become almost too neutral a term. They're Jewish, they're Nazis. But it's so inflammatory to call them Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
People shrink back from it. I don't encourage everybody in your audience to be as blunt as I am. But you can find a way to name what the Democrats are doing. What they did to Ashley Babbitt, they're gangsters. I don't know how else to describe their mentality. To countenance the murder of an innocent woman, unarmed and threatening no one. And the whole Democrat leadership did that.
It is very troubling what was happening there on January 6th. There's a lot of video. Finally, I'm thinking about also you have concern about how regarding the FBI and the media. Can you explain that?
Well, look, the problem, almost all the problems that we face, all the miseries we're going through, I trace to the takeover of the universities, the whole educational system by the left. I wrote five books about this. But where do the FBI guys come from? They go through criminology departments, which are supporters of criminals in our universities. Where do these media people? It used to be that if you were a reporter, you probably didn't go to college. You reported what you saw. Now there was a study of 2,000 communications departments, and in American universities. And communications departments are the credentialing agencies for your media people. They couldn't find one conservative on the faculty.
Wow.
And I've had the head of the communications department at the University of Texas lead. I go to lecture at a college, and you have to have a certain atmosphere to have an educational experience. Mm-hmm. And if you can't have it at a university, where can you? And she led the audience, or that part of it that were leftists. The minute I got up and saying, shame on Horowitz, and chanting, Horowitz, go home, and whatever. What's destroyed our country is our educational system. That's what they infiltrated. That's what they control. And that's where they indoctrinate kids who, when I went to college, my professors always took the view that was directly opposite to what the student had a view of Moses and monotheism, Freud's book. The teacher would take the opposite view, and that taught you how to think. Mm-hmm. But if there's only one legitimate point of view, you can't think. And the incompetence, that's what one thing of the Biden administration. This is the worst people, the worst vice presidents, the stupidest most incompetent, useless vice president in our history. A moron who's the press secretary who can't even spin the truth, but has to lie so obviously that nobody believes her. The head of the DHS, Mayorkas, another brazen liar and incompetent in his job. You could just go on. And so it doesn't surprise me that we're in the state we're in.
I know, a lot of risk for America that you make very clear, your points in your book. And I would encourage everyone watching to read Lincoln's proclamation for the solution for America in the middle of the Civil War. It is a troubling time. Thanks for bringing attention, David, to these issues, and looking forward to having you join us again for some other updates as we get closer to this election.
Thank you, Dr. Harper. I appreciate the opportunity.
Best wishes to you and your family.
Pray for our country.
Pray for our country that's in trouble. Yes. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, David.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.